What is up, YouTube? What is up, college football fans? The season is almost here, and what I want to talk about today is Clemson's road or path to the playoffs. And I know what you're thinking. You're saying, hey, Pete, the path to the playoffs is winning the ACC because that's what they do almost every single year for the last decade. And that is true, and they are favored again this year to win the ACC, but there is a reason that they play the games. They don't hand out trophies in August or September. A lot of things can happen, and there's some interesting games on the schedule. We're going to look at the schedule here in a minute, and Clemson plays a lot of the better projected teams. Let's put it that way. I don't want to say the better teams. The better projected teams in the conference. Now, they dodge Miami, who is projected to be a top 2 or 3 team in the ACC, possibly win it. But they played at least 3 or 4 of the other top teams. They really need to win all of those. They may be able to afford to lose one, but these are some tricky games here. And also, their out-of-conference schedule is going to play a big part in this as well. Now, last year, Clemson was 10-2 in the regular season, won the ACC, lost in the first round of the playoffs to Texas. So they're 0-3. They lost to Georgia, they lost to South Carolina, and then they lost to Texas in the playoffs. They're 0-3 in their last 3 games against the SEC. Well, at least a couple of those were competitive. Obviously, they got blown out by Georgia week 1. The South Carolina game was a 1-score game, and then the Texas game was a 1-score game with like 3 minutes left or something. Texas scored late to make it a 2-score game. But anyway, in my opinion, they play 2 SEC teams this year. Both of them are going to be towards the top of the SEC, at least in the top 5. I think LSU may be in the top 3 of the SEC this year. We'll see. But I think South Carolina's kind of a sleeper game there. And that game is in Williams-Brice in Columbia this year. Now, that hasn't seemed to matter. The last time that South Carolina won a game against Clemson in Williams-Brice, I believe, was like 12 years ago. Or was it 2012, 2013, something like that. So, but let's take a look at it here. So we open up the season against LSU on August the 30th, Labor Day weekend, just a few weeks from now, in a home-and-home series starting out in Death Valley, Clemson, South Carolina. Then next year we travel down to Baton Rouge and play in their version of Death Valley. And it's going to be a great home-and-home series. Both these teams, in my opinion, are going to be preseason top 10. The AP poll should be coming out here very soon. The coaches' poll has already come out. You got both these teams listed in the top 10 of the coaches' poll, I believe. And you're probably going to see Clemson when the AP poll comes out. I've seen a lot of different projections and polls for Clemson preseason. And you got them anywhere from all the way up to number 2 down to like 6 or 7. I think when the AP poll comes out, you'll see somewhere around there. I'd say their ceiling for the preseason ranking would probably be 2, and the floor would probably be 6 or 7. I think they'll be somewhere around 4 or 5. That's where I would have them if I was to make my own top 25 poll, which I probably will. Or not poll, because it's just me, my own top 25 preseason ranking. I would probably have Clemson somewhere around 4 or 5. But this is a big game because, look, when we start talking about some of these other ACC games, Clemson can't afford to really slip up against the Georgia Techs, the Louisvilles of the world, Syracuse, teams like that. So this is a very important game, both for the end of the year schedule and possibly, let's just say hypothetically, Clemson runs through the ACC like a hot knife through butter. And they get to the ACC championship game against a pretty good ACC team, which would be either the first or second best team in the ACC that year, and they lose in a one-game scenario, then they don't get their automatic bid in the playoffs. Now they have to rely on these out-of-conference games against big boys like LSU and South Carolina, respectively, to probably get not an automatic bid, but whatever you call it, a bid in there. At-large bid into the 12-team playoff. So this is a huge game. Clemson's favored by 3. These are two very good teams with 2 veteran quarterbacks. Garrett Nussmeier is, in my opinion, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Definitely in the ACC. Definitely in the SEC, but one of the best in the country. They're loaded on defense. LSU is. They've got big boys up front on both sides of the ball. They can run the ball. This is a pretty good. This is a complete team. Now Brian Kelly has to get over the hump with winning an opener at LSU. He's 0 for 3. He's going into season 4 with the Bayou Bengals down there. He's 0 for 3, and like I mentioned in previous videos, at least 2 of those games, he had a better team than them and still lost. So Death Valley in Clemson is not going to be a hospitable place for LSU to start their season out. It's going to be a night game. It's going to be rocking. And Clemson, respectively, also has a very loaded team this year. Probably the most loaded team across the board since the 2018 National Championship team. This is not the 2018 National Championship team. I'm not claiming that they're that good. I'm not claiming that they're going to go 15-0 and win the National Championship like they did in 2018. I'm just saying across the board, talent-wise, this is the best team on paper that they've had since 2018. The last time these two teams met was in the playoffs. Joe Burrow and company lit the scoreboard up, and they destroyed everybody in the playoffs, not just Clemson. And I think the only time before that they played them, actually, I was there in 2012 at the Peach Bowl in Atlanta at the old Georgia Dome, and Clemson won at the last second there. That was a very close game as there as well. So this is one everybody will be keeping their eye on, and I think Clemson really needs to, for a lot of reasons, both for their schedule and their playoff hopes and just for morale. You don't want to start the season out going 0-4 in your last 4 games against the SEC, and you don't want to start the season out losing at home. So this is a huge game for both Clemson and LSU. Next week they got Troy. We're going to chalk that up as Clemson will be a big favorite there. We'll chalk that up as a win for the Tigers. Now this is where it gets interesting. We start getting into ACC play here, and they travel to Georgia Tech in week 3. So you got one really tough game week 1, I guess a quasi cupcake game, if that's what you want to call it, week 2. And then you play one of the better teams projected in the ACC this year with another very good, I want to say a Heisman caliber, but he'll be on Heisman watch list if Georgia Tech is any good. But they're projected to be one of the top 3 or 4 ACC teams this year, Georgia Tech. Haynes King is an absolute beast. This is an old rivalry that goes way, way back. Now, ever since they started doing they got rid of the divisions, these two teams don't play each other every single year. They did not play each other last year. But if you go back over the history of this rivalry, it doesn't matter which team is 10 times better than the other one. There has been many times where Clemson was a much better team on paper than Georgia Tech, but there's just something about that Georgia Tech team, this rivalry. You just never feel really comfortable. Now, I'll be there. I'll be at the game with my boy Erect Hawk and Sea Dog week 3. So anybody who's going to be, any Clemson fans or Georgia Tech fans, if you're going to be in Atlanta week 3, holler at your boy. We'll be hanging out and tailgating and doing whatever those Georgia Tech people do down there. I don't know. I told those guys, I said, I need the full-on nerd experience. I've been to a ton of Clemson games over my lifetime. I've been to bowl games. I've been to for some reason, I have never been to Bobby Dodd in Atlanta. So I'm really looking forward to that. This is a must-win game. This is one I have circled, not just because I'm going, just because I think it's an extremely important game for Clemson. Almost a must-win game early in the year in the ACC. After that, Clemson travels to Syracuse. Is that at Syracuse? I don't know. It doesn't say on there. No, I think it's in Clemson. I'm just going off of memory now. It doesn't say on the schedule there. Clemson hosts Syracuse. A lot of hype being put around Syracuse because of Fran Brown's breakout season last year. They had a pretty good season for Syracuse. They were a tough out. They had some big wins. If this game were in Syracuse, I might be a little bit more nervous about it. But the fact that it's in Clemson, I think, is huge here. And I'm going to give the win to the Tigers. But this is a big game for Clemson as well. We're just going to breeze through these next couple here. I just don't think these two teams are going to be able to compete with Clemson unless Clemson has some sort of injury problem at quarterback or something with Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik is obviously a very, very integral part of the season and their playoff hopes altogether. Their ACC hopes, their playoff hopes, their hopes to beat the two SEC teams on their schedule, and even some of these other ACC teams. So, but North Carolina and Boston College, I just think are in the bottom half, lower tier, at least bottom half. I wouldn't say lower tier, at least the bottom half of the ACC teams this year in my mind. So those should be wins for Clemson. This one's interesting here. We get SMU. So SMU and Clemson played, everybody knows, in the ACC championship game last year. Clemson had to kick like a 62-yard field goal or something to win at the very end. It was a very competitive game. They return a lot, SMU does. They return a lot of stars, including their dynamic quarterback. This should be a knockdown, drag-out fight. Huge, huge ACC game. These probably, in my mind anyway, let's just go ahead and list them to put it out there. That would make things make more sense. Here's my top 5 ACC teams this year, preseason. Obviously, Clemson, Miami, SMU, Louisville, and Georgia Tech. That's my top 5 in no particular order. That's just my top 5. And if you look at those teams, those top 5 teams, they all have one thing in common. They've got dynamic quarterback play. And the same is true for SMU. This is a huge, huge game here that everyone should have circled on their calendar if you're an ACC fan. Then they play Duke. Duke is Manny Diaz's second year. They had a 9-4 season in Manny Diaz's first year, which is pretty good for Duke. They had an amazing defense. I think defensively they're going to be pretty good. They've got who is the quarterback transfer they got? Oh yeah, they got the Tulane, the guy from Tulane, Dorian Mensah from Tulane, who's a pretty good player. I think there's some questions there on offense for Duke, and we're going to do the Duke and Wake Forest schedule season previews tonight on the ACC show. So we'll talk a lot about Duke tonight, but I think that this is a sleeper team. This is a team that obviously Clemson should beat, but you just don't want to you don't want to just chalk it up to a win. You got to go out there and play and win the game. I think defensively they're going to be very good. If they get a couple of turnovers, it could be a problem for Clemson. Then they play Florida State. Florida State coming off a 2-10 season. We already did the Florida State preview. We had them at something like 5-7, which is a massive improvement over last year. But, however, I still think Florida State has a long way to go. People are telling me what Florida State fans are saying, well, that was an outlier. Obviously, it was an outlier. I mean, anytime a team like Florida State goes 2-10, it's an outlier. We get that. But they were also loaded last year, too. Now, they had quarterback problems with DJ, and then they played 3 or 4 quarterbacks throughout the season. I do think they'll right the ship a little bit, but I'm giving the win to Clemson here. That's obviously a big rivalry game in the ACC. Clemson and Florida State play each other every year. They're 2 of the biggest brands, and anything can happen, I guess. But I'm just not a believer in Florida State until I see otherwise. Huge, huge game here against Louisville. Louisville projected to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the ACC. A lot of people have them as a sleeper to win the ACC, and that's another huge one. So there, I just mentioned Louisville, SMU, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, teams like that. And even to a lesser degree, probably Duke, that Clemson needs to keep their head on a swivel and win these games. Very, very important to win these games. Then they have Furman. They'll beat Furman the week before. They travel to Columbia to play a South Carolina team who is, man, I've been a Clemson fan my whole life, and obviously being a Clemson fan, pay a lot of attention to the Gamecocks. And I think you've got to go back a long ways. You've got to go all the way back to Steve Spurrier years to see people as high and excited about the Gamecocks as they are going into this season. And that includes me. If you look at the quarterback play, they've got, I think their front 7 on defense is going to be very good. Offensive line, it might be a little bit of an issue. I think their running game will be good. They've got a couple of dynamic wide receivers. Look, South Carolina, now, I hope as a Clemson fan that they fall on their face like they tend to do, but this is probably, again, the best projected Gamecock team that we've seen in a long time, and Clemson has had some problems with them in recent years. South Carolina's won 2 out of the last 3 games against Clemson. Now, both of those were in Death Valley. This game is in Williams-Brice. I do think this will be a 1-score or less game as long as both Lenore Sellers and Cade Klubnik are still – no one's really 100% healthy at the end of the year, right? But, somewhat healthy going into that game, and there's no major injuries with either one of those quarterbacks. This should be a shootout or a knockdown, drag-out fight, one of the two. I just don't see one of these teams blowing the other one out. But, again, if you look at Clemson's schedule in the ACC, if they drop 1 or 2 ACC games – or they drop one ACC game but still then lose the ACC championship game, which will be after the South Carolina game. They need this out-of-conference schedule wins against teams like both South Carolina and LSU to get their at-large bid into the top 12. It's just as simple as that. So this is a huge game every year, whether or not they're playoff teams or not. But I think this year there's going to be a little bit of extra spice put on it because South Carolina also has playoff aspirations. Maybe not. I mean, the SEC is a tough league to win, and they're not anywhere near the favorites to do that. But they could be at the end of the year, if they have a good enough record and a win against Clemson at the end of the year, they could get an at-large bid there to get in the top 12. So a huge game for both teams, in my opinion. So there you have it. I have not done my official Clemson schedule preview yet. I will do that, but I'll give you a spoiler alert here. I do have them going 11-1. But 10-2 is probably more likely, but I have them going 11-1, and I will not let you know who I think that team is that's going to beat them until I do the preview. I have done this. Some people know if you watch some of these other channels, I've done some Clemson schedule preview on other channels, just not my own. So some of you may already know who I have them losing to. But anyway, let me know down in the comments section about this schedule. I know it's an ACC schedule, blah, 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 week schedule, whatever. They played two big boys out of conference in South Carolina and LSU, and they play 3 or 4 of the top 5 teams in the ACC. So it's not a cakewalk as much as I think Clemson's schedule last year was actually easier than it is this year in the ACC. So let me know what you think their record's going to be this year and what could possibly sidetrack their ACC championship hopes and their playoff hopes. And make sure you hit the like button and subscribe button on the way out too. Thank you.